Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
It's so wild to think that for centuries, scientists have been trying to nail down what exactly sets the human brain apart from our closest relatives, monkeys and apes.
Yeah.
And you think back to, like, Victorian times and the theories they had, some of them are pretty funny now.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there was this whole thing about a specific part of the brain called the hippocampus minor
Right.
being exclusive to humans.
Hmm.
Turns out, completely not true.
Yeah.
But it shows you how long we've been on this quest to really understand what makes us us.
Absolutely. I mean, even though those early ideas were way off, that same fundamental question still drives us today. What is it about our brains, about how we think, that truly makes us human? And that's exactly what we're going to be diving into today with some really cool new research. Instead of just looking at brain size or even the size of different parts, this study delves into the connections inside the brain, like the intricate wiring.
It's like we're going beyond just looking at the hardware and trying to map out the software.
Yeah.
So this study we're going to unpack compares the internal wiring of human brains to, well, our closest living relatives, chimpanzees,
Right.
and also macaque monkeys, which are, a type of primate that scientists have studied a lot.
Yeah, they're a great model for understanding primate brains in general.
And the information we're going to be dissecting today comes from a health news article that came out on March 29th, 2025. And that article did a great job summarizing a much more detailed scientific paper that was published in the Journal of Neuroscience.
Yeah, and it's that original research paper that we're really going to be leaning on today, because it's packed with fascinating details.
So our mission today is to take those really complex findings and break them down, to extract those key insights that are going to help you understand what makes the human brain tick. And we want to do it in a way that's clear and fun.
Definitely. No need to get bogged down in all the technical jargon.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of this study. What exactly were these researchers trying to figure out? What was their main goal?
The main goal was to really pinpoint which aspects of the brain's organization, like how it's structured, are truly unique to humans.
Okay.
And they did this by comparing what they called the connectivity fingerprints of different regions within the brains of humans, chimps, and macaques.
Connectivity fingerprints. That's interesting. What does that even mean?
It's a great question. Imagine each area of the brain has its own unique pattern of connections to all the other areas, kind of like a signature. That's its connectivity fingerprint.
Oh, okay.
And their whole idea was to move beyond the simple idea that human brains are just bigger and really try to grasp how different parts of the brain are connected and how they talk to each other.
So, it's not just about the size of the room. It's about how all the wires are running through it.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did they actually map out these connections? How do you even begin to do that?
Well, they use data from magnetic resonance imaging, MRI scans, but they focused specifically on the white matter of the brain, which is made up of nerve fibers that carry signals between different areas of the brain's cortex.
So white matter is basically the brain's communication network.
Exactly. Think of it like the brain's internet cables.
So they were looking at the big picture of how brain regions connect, not so much the individual brain cells.
Yeah. It's more about the flow of information, not the individual neurons.
Okay, so how did they actually compare these connectivity fingerprints once they had them?
They used a pretty sophisticated mathematical tool called Kullback-Leibler divergence. It's a way to measure how much two different probability distributions differ from each other.
Okay, so in simpler terms.
Basically, it let them quantify, put a number on how much the wiring patterns differed between the same brain areas in humans, chimps, and macaques.
Oh, I see. That's really cool. So they could literally see how much our brain wiring differs from, say, the chimpanzees.
Exactly.
Okay, so what were some of the big things they discovered when they compared these wiring patterns? Were there any big surprises?
Well, a lot of previous research on what makes the human brain unique has focused on the prefrontal cortex.
Right, the part at the very front of the brain.
Yeah, the area involved with complex thinking, planning, decision-making, all that good stuff.
Executive function center.
Exactly. But this study actually found that the most striking differences were in the temporal lobe.
The temporal lobe. That's not where I would have guessed.
Yeah, most people don't. And it's a pretty large area of the brain, kind of behind your ears. And it plays a super important role in primates in processing things like what we see and hear.
So our senses.
Exactly.
Okay, so if the biggest differences weren't in the prefrontal cortex, what was so different about the temporal lobe in humans?
Well, one of the really interesting findings was in the middle part of the temporal cortex.
Okay.
And the key to this difference seemed to be something called the arcuate fasciculus.
What?
The arcuate fasciculus, it's a bundle of those white matter fibers, those communication cables we talked about.
Right.
And it connects the frontal and temporal lobes. Now, all three primate species have an arcuate fasciculus.
Okay.
But in humans, it's significantly larger. It's like a superhighway compared to a back road.
Wow, so we have a much stronger connection between the frontal and temporal lobes.
Exactly.
Now, I've heard about the arcuate fasciculus before, but I always thought it was mostly about language.
That's right. It's traditionally been linked to language processing in humans, but this study suggests that its role might be even bigger than that. You see, the brain areas connected by this beefed-up arcuate fasciculus in humans are also involved in integrating sensory information.
So like combining what we see with what we hear.
Exactly. And it's also involved in those complex social behaviors that we humans are so good at.
Okay, so it's not just about talking. It might be fundamental to how we make sense of the world and how we navigate those intricate social situations.
That's right.
Fascinating. So besides the arcuate fasciculus, were there any other key differences that jumped out?
Yes, there was another big one in an area called the temporoparietal junction.
Temporoparietal junction. Okay, where's that?
It's located at the back of the temporal cortex, right where it meets the parietal lobe.
Right.
And this area is super important for something we call theory of mind.
Theory of mind.
It's our ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, beliefs, and intentions, which might be totally different from our own.
Oh, right, like being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Exactly. And it's a critical skill for navigating the social world. Now, here's the thing. In humans, this temporoparietal junction area has way more connections to regions of the brain that process complex visual information, things like facial expressions and body language.
Interesting. So we're really wired to pick up on those social cues visually.
Right. It's like our brains have evolved to be super sensitive to social signals in our environment.
We are a very social species, that's for sure.
We are. And another interesting thing this study suggests is that human intelligence may not have evolved in one big jump. It challenges that traditional idea that, one big change in the prefrontal cortex is what made us so smart.
So it wasn't just one aha moment where we suddenly became human.
Right. Instead, the findings point to a more gradual, step-by-step process. Maybe changes in the frontal cortex happened earlier in our ape ancestors, and then later on, these big changes in the temporal cortex happened in the human lineage.
I see. So it was a multi-step process. Our brains were kind of building on earlier adaptations.
Exactly. It's a much more complex and fascinating story than just one big leap.
So these findings about the unique connections in our brains, especially in that temporal lobe, they have some pretty significant implications for how we understand human cognition, right? It's more than just an interesting anatomical fact.
Absolutely. This study strongly suggests that our advanced cognitive abilities, things like language and complex social interactions, they probably didn't just pop up overnight. It was likely a series of interconnected changes in how different parts of the brain talk to each other.
So evolution was tinkering with the wiring, slowly optimizing over time.
Exactly. It's like fine-tuning a complex machine. And the fact that the temporal lobe, with its souped-up arcuate fasciculus and the very socially tuned-in temporoparietal junction, is so different in humans, it really highlights how important those areas are in making us unique.
Yeah. It's like they're the secret sauce of human intelligence.
In a way, yes. And this study also reinforces that it's not just the size of our brains or even the size of certain parts that matters. It's how those parts are connected, how they communicate with each other that really makes the difference.
So the quality of the connections matters more than the quantity of brain matter.
Exactly. It gives us a whole new way of thinking about brain evolution.
And the finding about the temporoparietal junction being so connected to those areas that process visual social cues, that really drives home the point that our brains are really hardwired for social interaction.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It supports this idea that our ability to understand other minds, to navigate those complex social dances we do every day, is built right into the structure of our brains.
So we're not just social creatures, we're social by design.
Exactly.
Of course, no study is perfect.
Yeah.
What are some things we should keep in mind about the limitations of this research?
You're absolutely right. One thing is that this study relied on existing MRI data,
Okay.
and MRI gives us a good overall picture of those white matter connections.
Right.
But to get even more detailed, we'd need studies that can look at the brain at a cellular level.
Oh, I see. So it's like MRI shows us the major highways, but there might be a lot of smaller roads and pathways that we're missing.
Exactly. And another thing, the study shows a strong correlation between these connectivity patterns and brain functions,
Okay.
based on lots of other research.
Right.
But it doesn't actually prove cause and effect.
So just because we see these connections doesn't necessarily mean they're directly causing these specific human abilities.
Exactly. It's a correlation, not necessarily causation. And finally, this study focused on 3 specific primate species: humans, chimpanzees, and macaques.
Right.
And while those are great for understanding our evolutionary history, it would be even better to have data from a wider range of primates.
So we have a fuller picture.
Yeah, the more data we have, the better we can understand how brain connectivity evolved across different species.
Makes sense. So what did the researchers themselves say about their findings? What were their main takeaways?
Well, the lead researchers, Roger Mars and Catherine Bryant, they emphasized that their findings challenge the traditional idea that the prefrontal cortex is the main thing that makes humans unique. They were really surprised by how much the temporal lobe stood out and how important that arcuate fasciculus seems to be.
So even they had to rethink their assumptions a little bit.
Yeah, they said it really shifted their perspective. They also brought up Richard Owen, that Victorian paleontologist we talked about earlier.
Oh, right. The one with the hippocampus minor theory.
Yeah. And even though Owen was wrong about that, Mars and Bryant suggest that he was onto something bigger, that human brains are fundamentally different, just in ways that are more complex than he imagined.
That's a cool way to bring it full circle. He was pointing in the right direction, just off by a few details.
Exactly. And the researchers really emphasize the complexity of human brain evolution. They're saying it wasn't a sudden thing. It was a multi-stage process with different brain regions and connections changing over time.
Like a long, slow dance of evolution.
Right. And it highlights the importance of studying how the brain is wired, not just how big it is or the size of its parts.
It's about the connections, the intricate web of communication that makes us who we are.
That's it.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for all the little things that make our brains so special.
Me too. It really makes you appreciate the power of evolution and the amazing complexity of the human brain.
So, to our listeners, as you go about your day, think about those findings about our uniquely social brains. Think about those incredible networks firing away every time you interact with someone. Every smile, every conversation, every moment of connection. Those are all built on this intricate neural wiring that has been shaped over millions of years of evolution. It really makes you wonder, what does it truly mean to be human?
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.